How is going in Australia?
Oh, well, I'm living in Melbourne, and Melbourne has the claim to fame of being the most lockdown city in the world.
Yeah.
So we come out of that, and we're in our recovery phase. But there's quite a lot of psychological adjustments, and there's been economic impact as well. So it's not like it used to be, that's for sure, as so many other places in the world.
Yeah, and we see each other last week. You were in Geneva, so we are going to talk about that later on this show. But first of all, I want to know because we are talking about in the dentistry industry about dentist and holistic dentist. So you are an
Mhm.
holistic dentist, but what is it?
Okay, so in Australia, we use the word or the expression holistic, meaning in in the application of dentistry, we do recognize that the mouth isn't just a separate part of the body, that there's these interrelationships but with the whole body experience. And so that's one aspect. The other aspect is that when I was practicing, and I'm no longer practicing as a dentist, when I would look into a mouth, the mouth is a very good representation of all the tissue types. And over the years, I was able to see the whole spectrum of inflammation through looking at the gum tissue, looking
Hmm.
at the wear facets on the teeth. That would give me an indication of how they were sleeping, even a condition called sleep bruxism. So, holistic means looking at more than just black or white or teeth and gums. It's seeing
Hmm.
the interrelationship between this vital part of your body, how its oral health can have an impact over your overall systemic health, but vice versa too, so that um, certain conditions that you may be having you'll see manifestation within the mouth. For
Okay.
example, picking up osteoporosis, if I was seeing bone loss within the mouth. And if it was rapid, I would send my patients off to see their doctor to have a bone scan done. And sure enough, they would be suffering bone loss in other parts of their body. So this is where you have to appreciate the relationship between the oral structures and a whole body experience.
Okay. And concerning the heavy metal intoxications, if people are mercury intoxicated, they should go to an holistic dentist, I guess.
Well, not necessarily, because um, the information about how dentists should safely treat patients who
Hmm.
have got mercury intoxication. So, what happens is that dentistry for over 200 years has been using a very concentrated mercury added product in the form of silver fillings, also known as dental amalgam.
Hmm.
And they've been using, dentists have been using that substance for over 200 years to treat holes in teeth from dental decay. Now, there is definitely absorption of mercury throughout the body. So, hopefully, a holistic dentist is also putting focus on biocompatibility of dental materials. So, there is definitely a subclass of or a new genre of way to practice dentistry coming out of the USA called biological dentistry.
Exact.
And that is coming out with science based tested processes for how we should deliver dentistry. So there has to be a distinction between a dentist that is so-called holistic,
Hmm.
because that can also bring in like the mind, body, spirit approach as well, new age philosophies. So I use the word holistic in the way that I practice dentistry, but I'm also a biological practicing dentist, meaning that I would use science based, evidence based protocols, reviewing material safety data sheets on the materials that I would put into people's mouths, because they're going to be living with that implanted material for hopefully 20 or lifelong. So there's going to be an impact of the materials that we're putting in.
Yeah.
If that that's a very important distinction between holistic and biological.
Okay.
And whereas classical or conventional dentistry won't recognize the impact or the consequences of the materials they're using, and also the way that they're using dentists on overall health. So that is something that we have to work on to create those reforms.
And what was your personal link between Mercury, your health, your job? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because
That's right. I've been touched with mercury poisoning twice, and I had no idea that it was coming from my occupational exposure until, fortunately, I met a Swiss naturopath. And she said, Lisa, with your symptoms, you are a dentist, you will be full of mercury. And I thought, what? How can this happen? So this was going back into the 90s. And fortunately, because I was appropriately diagnosed, so by a hair tissue mineral analysis test,
okay.
and she detoxed me, and I'm alive today because of that correct intervention. So the symptoms that I was experiencing, there wasn't too much hair falling out, but there's anxiety, sleep disturbances. You're on the verge of suicidal depression, and dentists have a 6-fold incidence of suicide.
I
Life
know
really
that.
wasn't worth living. You become exceptionally fatigued. So I couldn't even brush my hair. I would force myself to go into work, do the job, and coughing.
Hmm.
So this is pre-COVID days. And now I understand what was happening, because what happens with dental workers, the mercury in the amalgam, you're inhaling it. It's even off-gassing out of the little capsules that they're in.
Hmm.
And I stopped placing them almost 38 years ago, when I
Wow.
found out that the mercury in them, as research articles coming out of the dental journal of European, very high caliber universities, started looking at the impact of dental amalgam. So I wasn't putting them in because I wanted to protect my patients and their unborn children. But my own occupational exposure, I didn't realize for about another 7 years. So we inhale the tiny little particles. So now in this COVID culture, we're aware of hazardous aerosols. But when you're in the dentist and they've got
Hmm.
that drill on you, or even if you're having your teeth cleaned, if you've got
Hmm.
those amalgam fillings, there will be a massive plume of mercury vapor that's
Hmm.
generated, or very, very tiny particles, 0.6 of a micron. And that will go immediately through your nose into your lungs, and within 20 seconds it's in your blood system and it's circulating there. So yes, that's pretty quickly how I got saved. And I noticed on your last podcast, Anita was talking about her mercury experience, and she said, well, if it's me, it's everybody. So I'm
Yeah.
very passionate about wanting to have safe practices within the dental clinic, not just for the patients, but occupational health. And we've got a large proportion of women dental workers. And then later on in my career, I became aware of the environmental damage that mercury does. The dental sector's got a lot to clean up. And then with my NGO, I've learned about the whole global concern of
Hmm.
mercury coming from other sources. But the dental sector is definitely a major contributor to the environmental impact of mercury. And it's the greatest source of mercury exposure you're going to have if you've got dental amalgams being put in your teeth.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, trying to change the policies and uh, clean up the sector. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that because we are going to talk about your NGO and but I really want to understand because I'm also passionate by the mercury intoxication since 12 years now and on heavy metal intoxications, I think mercury is one of the worst because I think the body can detox by himself only 20% of the mercury and the rest is inside the body. So it's a really
Mm.
it's madness like you said, you know.
Yes, yeah, there is mercury madness, and I've many years ago, and you can tell by the profile photo, so it's probably about 20 years ago. I wrote a series of articles, and sadly, nothing much has changed.
Yeah.
In spite of there being massive clinical evidence research papers, we've got fluorescent light bulbs banned now, but the greatest exposure you're going to have is coming from what the dentist puts into your tooth, and that's just perpetuating. We tried very hard with the NGO, and you were part of that action group, Nick, in
Hmm.
2019 to get a global phase-out date of dental amalgam. We worked really
Hmm.
hard at that United Nations convention. We needed to
It was
get
amazing.
2/3 of the world to agree, and we witnessed the long, sleep-deprived nights of debate that it just didn't happen. And yet it makes such common sense. Why are we still using a product invented 200 years ago that has 50% mercury? It's
Hmm.
absorbed. Your bioburden you'll pass on to your children through pregnancy. Alternatives are cost effective. They've been around for 70 years. Why are we still doing this? And if you're, the message for people who are watching this podcast, if you're waiting for there to be some level of government policy on this particular issue,
Hmm.
well, don't wait because it's a long time coming. I mean, there's been 40 years of dental action groups advocating for the ban on this stuff, and yet it doesn't seem to shift
Yeah,
policy
yeah.
whatsoever. So you've got to look after yourself, and that means be properly tested,
Hmm.
find dentists who are appropriately trained in this area, and progressively work through getting the amalgams altered to
Hmm.
the non-mercury alternatives.
There is not a lot of like I said, people's like fighting or like being an activist. But I know that you don't like this term, you know, because I think you're in another spirit because you create Say No to Mercury NGO. So it's a what a job to confront very high hands governments and institutions to make the change. So can you talk be a little bit about what is Say
Yes,
No to Mercury NGO?
yeah. So I set up Say No to Mercury because when I actually got access to the government documents, I realized that they weren't getting the full story, and they weren't getting access to knowledge. And I was thinking, if only they knew an alternative informed viewpoint, and if they could see that there is research, if they can see what's happening in other countries, then surely they would, common sense will prevail, and they'll make wise decisions in the interest of public health. Um, so I didn't realize at the time that the governments of the world have essentially relied on one particular body, and that's the one that represents the dentists. So that was my motivation, was just to give the policymakers a real life informed decision. So my approach is to well, if we're going to say I'm a lover, not a fighter. So I like to approach people in a friendly way. And I also let them know that I'm working as an independent here. There is no corporate interest. There is no money coming in from anywhere, really. I would work 6 days a week in my dental clinic, and I would self-fund my representation. I would fill out the form so I would have a voice. And it's 11 years now that I've been working in this area, and it'll probably be a lifetime because things are just going so slow.
Wow.
But yeah, so this, and I actually realized that when I did get the opportunity of talking to whether it's WHO or the governments around the world, when they saw that I didn't have a financial interest and I just wanted to be a messenger of the information, the doors actually started opening up. And because they could see that I was motivated from a good place. And I've got really nothing to benefit. So that is becoming a game changer for me. Yes.
What was the starting
And
point?
for my NGO. Yeah.
What was the starting point of creating this NGO?
Well, the starting point was when I became aware that my Australian government was, when they were in the development of this Minamata Convention, which is a global treaty. It represents the greatest consensus on any particular topic in history. It's a significant treaty. So it's a recognition that the element mercury is causing havoc and is a serious threat. Now, we saw global action happening to deal with the ozone layer and various unleaded petrol. I think only about 80% of the country signed up to convert over to unleaded petrol. We see the huge conversation about climate change, climate emergency, and mercury's connected with the climate change conversation as well. So it's a new convention. I think it came into force 2015. But in the early stages, I became aware that my own government was standing up saying, we don't want to have dental amalgam included in this convention. We need it to treat our public health. And I was just outraged because I'd been working in both the public health and the private sector in Australia. And I just was so horrified that they're wanting to keep this primitive, poisonous, polluting product to treat the poor people. And when I knew that in private practice, you could definitely be, you could have the safer, whiter, better looking alternatives. So there was a strong sense of social justice that really motivated me. So I found some colleagues, and then I started writing a letter to Parliament, and I got a meeting. Pardon me. And that was, I think, the 23rd of August, 2011. And then I started participating at the international meetings. The first one was in Nairobi. And that's going back to that page there. I took a side trip to the Masai Mara. Yes. So what we were actually seeing, and as I would talk to various African government delegates, they're not even being given access to the white fillings. So we've got a deliberate market push to the developing countries that if they are got the opportunity of having dentistry done, they've got no options whatsoever. They're being plugged full of mercury. Yeah, so I found that out. Also on that page is the work that I did in Timor-Leste. Timor-Leste has suffered genocide for decades. I wasn't aware until about 10 years ago that it was the poorest country in the world. It's my neighbour. It just sits a few hundred kilometres away from Darwin, the north of Australia, and it's a very much a forgotten country. And my heart just went out to them because I wanted to protect that vulnerable population of having mercury-based dentistry. So this is a really good example that I worked with Rotary and the Bellabo House Trust. We set up a dental clinic there, and I made it very clear that dental amalgam was never to come into that clinic, because there is definitely a move that happens where mercury dental amalgam gets dumped on, it gets donated to charities who want to do dental work. And so they go in and then they just plug them full of this mercury poison, and it'll just pollute their rivers and so forth. So that was, I was really motivated to try and protect that population. Yeah.
But why we used mercury amalgams? Why? What was the point to use mercury? I know that it's because it was
I
killing
know, it doesn't make sense, does it? All right.
Mercury kills every germs in the mouth. I think, and it was quite
Correct.
easy also to work with metal, this
That's
metal, because
right.
it's quite easy. But is it the only way?
Yeah. So it became there is definitely what I call the mercury age in healthcare, and it's been going on for thousands of years, actually. Alchemy, the whole mystery of alchemy is related to the magic of getting gold coming out of the earth. So there's quicksilver in it, known as mercury. They heat it up. It's invisible. They can't see it, but then this gold comes forward. So the alchemists were working with mercury as potent charms, elixirs to get you feeling better. There's a story of a famous Chinese emperor. He was fed mercury-based medicines to give him the energy, the spirit of what's the word? Immortality. When in fact it's the exact opposite. It poisons them, but they usually go mad in the consequence. And mercurial rage. So it's known, one of the symptoms of mercury intoxication is this. And it's in our language, Shakespeare talks about it. It's this mercurial rage, where you'll just have these fits of anger, violence. And here's an interesting story. I tracked back to the Dutch. So they'd say, Dutch courage, mad as a Dutchman, or these expressions. And they would actually give, before they would go into a battle, they would have a little shot of mercury. And they would just go crazy, and then they'd be killing people left, right, and centre. So, and they wouldn't care about dying. So
a lot of people are intoxicated.
They are definitely, and then we've also in bullets as well. It's lead, but it's also tainted with mercury. So if the lead doesn't kill you when it penetrates you, the mercury will get you down the track. So there's all these fascinating things from history. So you have to go back to the time when it was invented, and they were putting mercury in everything. We had all the asylums being set up around the countries where all the crazy people would go, and they were being given mercury to treat their ailments. The syphilis, that infection, and now we know that a lot of the symptoms that have been described as classical syphilis are actually the neurotoxicity coming from the mercury treatment. So when the Bell brothers, I'm pretty certain that it was the Bell brothers, they were chemists in England. They thought, okay, how can we fix up this hole in this tooth? So your options were either like gold jewelry, which most people couldn't afford. They were putting in things like lead, cow dung, these various mixes, and then they used mercury because it's liquid at room temperature, and they could pack in the silver metallic alloy that's got some tin and copper in it, and they would mix it with the mercury, and then it sets over time. So that was very easy application. So they use it because it was a quick fix. Even though there was debate at the time about the concerns about mercury, it was very fashionable and very trendy. Everything, like Abraham Lincoln was being fed blue mass, which was his that was for his anxiety, but and that's mercury based, but it creates more of these problems. So that's the historical context. But why are we still using this 200 years later? And the answers are that you have a mercury-based dental culture within the institutions. So we find that your dentists, your teachers at university, this is just the way things are done. And even in my education, although in the 80s, there was no attention paid to the toxicology of mercury. I still remember the lecture in Dental Materials 101. So we're talking about the material that's used more than any other dental material in the world. And the professor said, we use it because it's strong. And there are some concerns about it making you go mad. But that only comes from the dental nurses. They're a bit mad anyway. That's what he said. Now, I'm in a classroom which it was the greatest number of women students ever in dentistry. We had about 50%. Usually it's a male dominated. And that was all that was said on the topic. That was it, about whether this product can cause any harm at all. Now, there still isn't anything taught about the health impact or the occupational exposure or the environmental damage.
There is too many outside people. How many millions people have mercury inside their mouths over 40 years?
Yes, it's 10% of the world's mercury is bound up in human teeth. Yes, it's a big chunk. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And the concern is that if we've got an increase in population happening and they're still being taught mercury-based dentistry, we're going to see more mercury entering people and the environment because of the way it's being taught. Yeah.
I'm very also concerned because I want also to add to the audience that is going to look those interviews. It's if you have mercury amalgams in your mouth, don't rush to the first dentist or your family dentist, because there is a way to take it out, because sometimes your health could be impact more if you have a savage mercury amalgam deposit, So can you explain a little bit what is it, a safe deposit?
Yes, so there has been developed a protocol. It's known as the SMART protocol, the Safe Mercury Amalgam Removal Technique. And this involves the protection of inhalation of the, remember I was talking about those really, really fine particles. So it involves 3 levels of protection to be SMART compliant, and that is you've got to protect the patient, you've got to have yourself and your dental nurse protected, and then you've got to have specific, it's called a separator, and also air filter captures of the mercury vapors and particulate matter.
Wow.
So there's environmental protection as well. So this can be found through the IAOMT.org developed this protocol. They also, and what I liked about it is that they also validated it scientifically. So they did mercury, urine and blood measurements before and after the process. And they were able to establish that this provided very good protection. So there was no peaking of or elevation of the mercury afterwards. So you can have, provided the dentist is doing everything right, you can have that assurance. But going back to detox, Nick, a point I'd like to get across to the viewers here is that you can take all the vitamins you like in the world forever and ever in your lifetime. But if you've still got dental amalgam in your mouth, you will never, ever detox mercury, because that mercury filling will be constantly 24/7. It is releasing mercury into your body. So you've got to, so the appropriate steps are, you've got to have the safe, smart dental revision done first. You have to get rid of the reservoir. And then whatever your body has absorbed over your lifetime, then you can start mobilizing and eliminating it out of your body. So this is a very important step. I know a lot of the viewers will be health conscious. And there's a couple of things that I want to take this opportunity. First of all, oil pulling. You don't oil pull when you have dental amalgams in your mouth.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Because oil
Yes,
pull,
so
it's the wellness detox, and there is a misunderstanding between wellness detox and heavy metal detox, and sometimes you need to separate it.
correct. Yes, and so I see these trendy things saying, "Oh, I'm oil pulling," but if you've got an amalgam, you're actually going that oil, because mercury loves lipids,
Exactly.
fats, and you're actually going to be harming yourself more so. So that oil is going to be pulling out the mercury, and it's going to go straight into your lymph glands and your blood supply. And the oil pulling technique is designed to cleanse the glands there and your lymphatics, and you're actually doing the worst thing possible. The other funky detox gadgets that are out there too, where you soak your feet and there's this electrical current and things like that, you are going to poison yourself more so if you've got dental amalgams in your mouth. So the dental amalgam, it's a metallic alloy. It is constantly moving and releasing electrons and metal particles. And then there's already a natural process called galvanic corrosion. And then if you introduce these electrical currents, you are going to pull more mercury, and that's going to be absorbed through your body, overload your kidneys, liver, things like that. So it's free advice. There you go.
It's perfect, because on this show we are going also to have an interview with Boyd Alley, so I think we are going to go inside the cell, inside the mercury intoxications, about the impact on the body. So it will be perfect, and we will also have someone from the Melissa lab who made a lot of different kind of tests, and so yes, this is a very hot topic. And last week you were in Geneva, and you met Christophe, Dr. Christophe Gachet from Rhône
Yes,
Dental
he's a bit of
Clinic.
a rock star, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, you were too. It was a fantastic meeting, because I really want you to meet all together, because I think it's also a family, and is also in Geneva one of the only one, I think, to make a kind of safe deposit with the smart stuff. Can you talk about what is your next step?
The next step. I would
you.
like to. Okay. Well, I'm always trying to help others, and even though now I'm not a hands-on clinical dentist, I have a voice, and I'm using that voice, and that's why I did my trip to Geneva, because I wanted to meet with the United Nations Secretariat that deals with mercury, and I met with the World Health representatives of the World Health Organization as well. So I'm still wanting to be the voice of reason, putting forward what the problems are and where we need to steer, and the things that we need to introduce in order to protect human health and of course our environment. It's important that there's a message about preconception care, Nick, as well. There is so much environmental pollution, and mercury is a big factor in that it's very important, if you want to create a baby these days, that as a young woman, you get yourself detoxed, and your partner as well.
Exact.
If you want to bring into this world a child who isn't going to be damaged, you've got to clean up your act now. And addressing the oral health and the dental aspect is critical. And even if you haven't, like a lot of the younger people haven't had dental amalgam put into them, but they've nonetheless absorbed their mother's mercury bioburden in utero. And then we've got the environmental pathways. So you already come into this world with a very large toxic heavy metal burden, and mercury is particularly of concern because it does pass through the placenta.
Exact.
and it does impact. So not all heavy metals will do that, but the ones that do are really, really dangerous. And we're also seeing so my approach, for 40 years, I've been working in the dental sector, and my approach now is to shift on the to try and keep our environment and the biodiversity, our wildlife. They're very much the innocents in our planet and our wildlife. So they've really got my focus now. And I can do that by addressing mercury on a larger scale platform, such as all the energy sectors, whether they're oil and gas, your fossil fuel, your coal-fired plants, coal mining, but also the renewable energy sector is leaving a massive mercury footprint on this planet. And that was a message that I wanted to take to the UN, because we've got to try and get ahead of it. Because what's happening, we've got with deforestation and with the melting of the glaciers and the Antarctic and the Arctic circles there, we're seeing a release at historical unprecedented volumes of mercury that's been trapped away for probably hundreds of thousands, millions of years, but particularly since the industrial age, the rainforests and the glacier watersheds have been the sinks for storing the world's mercury pollution. And that is just all being disrupted now and disturbed. So the amount of mercury that's entering our food chain into the air, you can't escape it. Yeah. And then if you've got the dental stuff as well, our populations are seeing an unprecedented exposure. So this has to be addressed. If I use the word holistically, it's got to be addressed on so many different fronts. So I've got that awareness now. So dentistry was definitely my entry point into this topic. And I'm just constantly alarmed by just how serious this matter is. And it's only going to be by very strong policy, protective measures and global action are we going to reset how we are.
And it's invisible pollution, because I remember when I was studying all the detox part and the mercury intoxications, and I had the honor to have Boyd Ali as a professor. I remember that we were trained to ask patients if they're used to live above a dentist, not too far from a crematorium. So people, that don't realize when you're talking about mercury intoxication that it's not something like PCB or gasoline, or it's huge because it's very volatile, and
Yeah.
you need to be just a few, impact in few way that
Mm.
depending about your sensitivity, your health could be yeah, in a very nasty shape,
Mm.
if I can say
And
it
this
like
is right.
that.
You can't actually smell the stuff. You can't see it unless it's bound like to silver and like a dental amalgam. Um, yeah, so it's very insidious, but yes, it is omnipresent. It's out
Yeah,
there everywhere. Yeah, and
yeah.
the concentration of air levels, um, uh, water levels, and bioaccumulation in our food chain. So it used to just be a fish product, a fish problem, but that ain't the case anymore
Yeah.
because now here's a dental amalgam connection. Our sewage is full of mercury, and it's coming from here. I mean, it's coming from what we call amalgam bearers, where they're excreting it, they're chewing it off.
Mm.
It passes through the body. Sure, we'll have some entry into the wastewater from batteries and things like that, but there's aren't too many. Yeah, here's an example. You can't get a mercury-based battery anymore. They banned them, but why don't they do this? Get rid of the amalgams. All right.
Yeah.
So the sewage level and the mercury, so they can't burn it because that puts mercury up into the air. In Australia, they're just putting all this hazardous shit in silos for another day. But it's highly toxic. One of the uses of sewage is biosolids. And these biosolids are then used for fertilizers, and they get spread around the countryside. And sadly, even your organic farmers will be using mercury contaminated biosolids. So it accumulates in the food chain, in our plant life as well. We're seeing like the chicken industry in other animals are being fed fish meal, and that fish meal is mercury contaminated. So we're seeing it coming into our red meat and our white meat as well. So it's everywhere. So it's got to be
Mm.
addressed. Yeah.
Okay, okay, perfect. So I remember when we met, it was in the COP3 in 2019 in Geneva. The last one was in Bali, but it was quite complicated to go there. And the next one, I think it's in 2025, and it will be again in Geneva. So it's great news,
It should be
I
24,
think. Oh,
2024.
24. Okay, okay, 24. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So
in
it's
in,
coming
Gen
back to Geneva. Yeah,
in Geneva.
yeah.
So
Provided we can get in an aeroplane and
yeah.
we don't have our borders closed again. That'll be wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that you're not finished with the Switzerland adventure. So thank you a lot, Lisa, being here, and
Thank you, Nick.
I would love to have you again in another interview for other updates. And just for the next month, it will be new interviews, and also in June. In June. Oh, just I have a question. Did you already met Boyd Ali?
Yes, yes, yes. I met Boyd probably in the 90s when
Wow.
I was traveling over to the USA to acquire this knowledge
Hmm.
about how to practice safe dentistry.
Okay.
And he was at one of the conventions there. I've also used his product for my mercury poisoning.
The
So
RSR.
that Yes, OSR, and it's just it's a crime that we can't get that into the country.
Yeah, we're
So
working on that.
hopefully you'll. Yes, but it's like 20 years, you know,
I know.
to get something good happening.
Yeah,
These
yeah,
are the frustrations that really fatigue you when you
yeah.
are coming from a good place.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all the chelation part because this is also a way to detoxify. But the intravenous chelation, there is also things to say. And but with perhaps one day the new chelator from Boyd, things will change. So and I hope that we can help most of the people because people are really really waiting for that. Thank you,
Yes.
Lisa. Thank you.
Well,
Take care.
wonderful being you're doing
Th
great work, Nick. This is a really important topic and we have to get the conversation started. So I'm
yes.
very pleased to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye bye. Ciao.
Bye.